What's going on, everyone? When Patrick Beverley's trade to the Los Angeles Lakers became official, it pointed signs at Russell Westbrook gone. Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook have quite the history, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense to have Westbrook on the roster with Patrick Beverley because they have so many guards, especially undersized guards. Do you need to go and trade a wing player and another guard to acquire another guard, even of the likes of Patrick Beverley? And it's not that Patrick Beverley and Russell Westbrook can't coexist. Of course they can, but their history can be an issue. But they are both professionals. They both are those diehard, like, I'm going to give you 100% night in and night out players. Patrick Beverley has spoke very highly of playing with Russ and wanting to play with Russ and the Lakers. And I don't think it would be Patrick Beverley that would be the issue. I actually think it would be Russell Westbrook that would be the issue. But the whole thought process is, okay, this trade looks weird unless they do another trade. Now, if they do another trade, then okay, Patrick Beverley makes a lot of sense because that other trade is going to involve Russell Westbrook. So Russell Westbrook being gone, Patrick Beverley makes a world of sense at that point. And depending on what the other trade is, you might need another guard, and that's where like the rumors for like Dennis Schroeder and stuff like that are coming out of the woodworks. But when you're talking about Russ, there have been speculations and even reports from The Athletic talking about how maybe the Lakers John Wall Russell Westbrook. And here's the thing. They cannot John Wall Russell Westbrook. And I know many people probably feel otherwise. Like if you can't trade him, you send him home. You cannot do that. This team is not good enough to send a guy who had some very reasonable stats. Now, before you guys lose it and say Russ is this, that, and the other, I'm not saying he was a perfect player. He was very inefficient and he had a lot of flaws, but there were a lot of bright spots. And if Darvin Ham can get the most out of him, you gotta at least try with Westbrook. If it doesn't work, then maybe send him home. But you need to figure out a way to try to make it work. And if you can't, maybe you try to run him as the sixth man. And if that doesn't work, then maybe send him home. Because you're paying him a ton of money. Two, you gotta at least try to get something out of him. This Lakers roster isn't that good to where it's like, oh, we can just let a guy that will show up 82 games out of the year. What happens when LeBron doesn't play? This roster might not even win a game. At least Russ very likely can pull out enough to get at least a game or two or three or several. Anthony Davis, same thing. You need Russ for more than just like being the third guy. You know LeBron's going to miss games. You know several other guys are probably going to miss games. And if you sent Russ home for the year, you can't just call him back and just say, hey, well, we need you for this game, because we're short and we're getting killed and we're not. You got to try to make it work with Russ other than a trade. Obviously, a trade is the number one option. But we'll dive into that a little more. First off, I just want to say, like how I was talking about, Russ had a solid year in moments. He wasn't great overall. He was inefficient. If you just look at him on paper, he looked phenomenal, right? He had 18.7 rebounds and 7 assists. If Darvin Ham can get Russ to replicate that, but on a more efficient manner, which we saw signs of Russ being able to do that. And people do have recency bias. I can't tell you the amount of comments and just stuff that I see from people. People forget that Russell Westbrook was a 30-point triple-double guy night in and night out a year earlier with Bradley Beal, and the two of them single-handedly, essentially, took the Wizards to the playoffs. Now, they didn't make it much past that, but Russ was really good for the Wizards and got to the Lakers and became immediately the third option, and Frank Vogel did Russ no favors whatsoever. But Russ had the most points in a half since Kobe Bryant's final game. And then you look at all these stats. You can pause this video, you can rewind it, do whatever you need if you want to see these stats. But as far as Laker players, he was second in points with 1,441. He was first in assists with 550, first in rebounds with 580. Then he was first in steals with 75, first in defensive rebounds with 470, second in offensive rebounds with 110, first in free throws made at 266, first in DD with 28, and first in TD with 10. I mean, he still had a very solid year for being the third option on a Lakers team. Now, was it the best year ever? Absolutely not. Was he inefficient? Absolutely. But there were so many factors in Russ. Russ was one of the problems, but he wasn't the main problem. He wasn't the only problem. And as much as people talked about his efficiency and him playing terribly, you can even see the percentages and the dates in which he shot. And most of them were, 47 in the 40 range. He did have a couple games where he was terrible and had a 30%. But for the most part, he shot, 40%, 45% from the field. Again, as a third option, his biggest game of the season for the Lakers was 35 points, 15 assists, and 14 rebounds, and almost single-handedly won that game for them. I still believe Russ has a lot left in the tank. I just think the situation he's in with the Lakers isn't the best situation for him. But I do think there is a way to get the most out of him. It's just not having him and LeBron on the court at the same time. The whole reason the Lakers went and got Russell Westbrook was so when LeBron wasn't in the game, Russ could run point. And when LeBron missed games, because he's inevitably going to miss a couple games, that Russ could be enough to carry the load while LeBron's gone. We never even saw that take effect with Frank Vogel. He always ran LeBron and Westbrook, or he ran, Westbrook and THT. He ran the worst lineups ever, constantly changing. We needed size. That was a big issue too, and shooting. And it was a mess. And I really think Darvin Ham, with the 4-out, 1-in offense, is really going to be able to get more out of Russ. He's going to be able to allow Russ to get ahead of steam, go downhill. He's going to be able to put him in a dunker position, stuff like that. I really believe if you start the game with Russ, because you got to, just for his ego, you tell him, hey, you're going to play 5 minutes with LeBron and Davis, figure it out, get it together, right? You sub LeBron out, you sub Davis out at the 6-minute mark, whatever, and you let Russ just go. You just tell Russ, look, you got till the end of this quarter to just be Russ. Do whatever you do. He ends the quarter, then to start the second, you have LeBron and Davis in the game, right? Yeah, you have that momentum. Then when they get subbed out, boom, you put Russ back in. Maybe run Russ and Davis a couple times to get a feel. Maybe run small spurts with LeBron and Westbrook, but that's what the start of games are for. And if Russ is really good, then you keep him in to close games too. If he's knocking down his shots, he's getting to the hoop, he's finishing at an efficient rate, stuff like that, then I really think you can make this work. You run Westbrook as your sixth man. You have to start him just for the sake of his ego, but beyond starting him, you're running him in the 6-man minutes, and that's what that is. I really think you could get an efficient Russ. I really believe that Russ could go and get you 18, 7, and 7 in the time that he's playing if he doesn't have to just be relegated to standing in the corner or, just completely out of the play entirely because LeBron is, doing his thing and, pulling up for 35-foot jumpers and stuff. They need a more fluid offense. One of the huge things with Russ was the pick and roll. And Frank Vogel just completely went away from it. It had an 85% scoring rate or something ridiculous like that. Teams couldn't stop it. And then they had a 6-month stretch or whatever where they didn't run it again. It made no sense. But if I'm going to talk highly about Russ, we got to talk about the negatives, right? And the big thing was missed layups and dunks, which Russell Westbrook led the league in with 280. RJ Barrett was 271. Franz Wagner was 254. And Jason Tatum, surprisingly, that actually surprised me a lot. Jason Tatum was fourth on missed layups and dunks with 217. That's actually really surprising. But, Russ, again, he was inefficient in a lot of ways. And I'm not trying to say Russ was he's never been the most efficient player, period. But you traded for Russ for a specific reason, and you never did that with Russ. Not one time did you do that. The only time Russ got to be Russ was when LeBron and Davis weren't playing at all. And we saw a 35-point triple-double monster. He still has it in there. He just needs to be able to finish at the rim and just around the rim more efficiently next year. He missed so many layups and dunks and just all kinds of stuff. I remember screaming at the TV, just come on, man, make your layups. And I really think if he can kind of just get into the flow and Darvin Ham can put him in a position to be successful, I would rather them try to make it work than just go home. We're going to pay you your $47 million. We're going to John Wall you. The Lakers aren't in the position that Houston was. They could do that because they were a tanking team. They don't care. But you can't do that as the Lakers because you're not a tanking team. You're trying to win this year. And you still have a guy that is going to be your most consistent player at best. Not an efficiency manner on the court. I'm talking about a guy that you know will play all 82 games. You can't say that for LeBron and you can't say that for Anthony Davis. Westbrook might end up being the only player on the Lakers next season to play 82 games. This team isn't good enough. Now, if you could go and trade Russ and get, a Buddy Hield and Miles Turner, or you do the Utah deal for whatever pieces you can get, okay, then it makes sense. But if the Lakers are stuck with Russ and they can't make a trade, you cannot John Wall him. You cannot send him home for nothing. You have to try to get something out of him because the Lakers need that. I mean, even if he's a guy that's just putting up 10 points, 2 rebounds, and 2 assists a game, that's still better than a guy that's not at home. Like that, it makes no sense to send him home. And I know a lot of people want, just send him home. Just do that. The Lakers aren't in a position to do that. And unless he's just, blowing up the locker room or just doing some crazy stuff, which I don't think he's going to be that bad. As terrible as it was last year, he wasn't that terrible during the season. He had a lot to say after the season, but he showed up. He did his thing. He's a professional. He's going to play. He's going to do what he needs to do. But you got to at least try to make it work for a good sample size. If you try him as like I said, you start him, sprinkle his minutes in there throughout. If he's doing great, close him out for games. If that doesn't work, you start him as your 6th man entirely. Run that for, 20 games or whatever. And then if that doesn't work, then maybe send him home. You got to at least try to make it work if you're stuck with Russ. He's too good, too talented, and you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. You guys wanted him. Figure it out. Figure out how to make this work because you're stuck with him for this year. I'm not saying they will be, but I'm saying, if that's the case, if worst case scenario is Russ is on this roster, I really don't think that's the worst case scenario. Lakers will have $32 to $33 million in cap space next season. You could go get a couple pieces. If Kyrie really does want to come to the Lakers, then there you go. You got the money to sign him. Whatever. You go and make a trade. Whatever. The end result is if you end up stuck with Russ, you have to at least try to make it work. You got to do what you can because the Lakers are not good enough to just say, hey, we can send Russell Westbrook home. And we're not a tanking team. We're trying to make the playoffs. We're trying to win. But those are my thoughts and opinions. And as always, I pass the question on to you. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you think yes, we're not good enough to just send Russ home? If Russ is on the roster, you make him play. You're not paying $47 million for a guy to sit at home. Or do you think, no, send him home, do what you got to do. It's better to have him on the couch, which I don't understand that argument. I don't know how it would be better for him to just be at home not playing than getting a guy that, even if he is inefficient, he's still getting you 18, 7, and 7 a game. That's better than a guy that's giving you nothing. Who else on this roster currently is going to be able to do that, even in an inefficient manner? I don't know. I don't think there's any players on this team. And I'm super high on Kendrick Nunn, but he's not a 18, 7, and 7 guy. But anyway, again, however you feel about it, love to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. That being said, hit that like button. Helps me out a lot. Lets me know you enjoy these types of videos, and I truly appreciate it. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit that subscribe button, followed by the bell notification. Stay up to date with all things sports. Join this wonderful community and all of our discussions. I'll see you all in the next one. Thank you.